My stepmother invited me to her birthday gala only to publicly claim I stole the family business from her daughter. Return what isn't yours. She yelled at me. The other guests started booing me and kicked me out of the event. 2 hours later I returned and stunned everyone. My stepmother invited me to her birthday gala, only to accuse me in front of everyone of stealing the family business from her daughter. Return what isn't yours, she bellowed. The guests began booing, and I was forced out of the event. 2 hours later I returned stunning everyone. Return what isn't yours, Venus, my stepmother Judith screamed, her voice echoing throughout the grand ballroom. You stole my daughter's birthright. As her words rang out, the light from the crystal chandelier seemed to dim, and every face turned to stare. My heart raced and I stood frozen, my champagne glass nearly slipping from my grasp. My name is Venus Carter, a 31-year-old pianist who never imagined I'd end up running my father's manufacturing company. Just an hour earlier, I had walked into the Westbrook Hotel ballroom for Judith's 55th birthday gala, sincerely hoping to repair our strained relationship. It had been a year since my father passed, and the tension between us was almost suffocating. When her invitation arrived last week, I believed she was finally ready to move on. I couldn't have been more wrong. This wasn't an olive branch, it was an ambush. Apparently, that company belonged in Pamela's hands. Judith advanced toward me as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Your father built that business for his children, and you took advantage of him when he was sick. I scanned the room, desperately searching for a friendly face among Houston's business elite. Clients, suppliers, and community leaders I'd worked with for months, all now looking at me with shock and growing disapproval. That's not what happened, I tried to protest, but my voice was weak and barely audible. My father's will was clear. He wanted his true daughter to inherit the company, not some piano-playing charity case who rarely visited him. Judith's harsh words stung, and tears welled in my eyes. I had been on tour for years and yes, hadn't been home as much as I should have. I carried that guilt daily, but to have it hurled at me in public was devastating. Behind Judith, my stepsister Pamela stood with a smug smile. While she had never cared about the business when Dad was alive, now she nodded along with every word her mother spoke. She's right, you know, someone murmured from a nearby table. I always found it odd how she suddenly appeared when Thomas got sick, added another voice. The room seemed to close in on me as more people joined the chorus, even a few booed. The whispers escalated into open hostility. I think you should leave, Judith said calmly, as if she had already won. Nobody wants a thief at this celebration. As I made my way to the exit, my legs trembling, one thought became clear. I would not let this stand, not tonight, not ever. I reached my car before the tears finally came. Sitting alone in the dark parking lot, I gripped the steering wheel as sobs racked my body. The humiliation burned through me like acid. These weren't just strangers, they were key members of Houston's business community, people whose respect I'd worked so hard to earn over the past year. My father, Thomas Carter, built Carter Manufacturing from nothing over 40 years. He married Judith when I was 15, welcoming her and 12-year-old Pamela into our lives after my mother's death. While Dad was alive, Judith had played the role of supportive wife, but everything changed after his cancer diagnosis 3 years ago. I remember sitting by his hospital bed as he held my hand. Venus, he said in a weak but determined voice, you have a brilliant mind for business, something Pamela simply lacks. She's smart, but she doesn't care about Carter Manufacturing like you do. I've seen how you analyze situations and understand what makes things work. He squeezed my hand. I'm leaving the company to you, and I need you to promise that you'll take care of it. I gave up my touring career to honor that promise. At first, when the will was read, Judith and Pamela seemed to accept his decision. But within weeks, their subtle undermining turned overt. Tonight was the public culmination of a year-long campaign to discredit me. As I wiped my tears, my phone buzzed with a text from Bernard Wesley, my father's longtime attorney and executor of his will. Just heard what happened. Are you okay? Call me. I dialed him immediately, my voice still shaky as I recounted the events. This is unacceptable, Bernard said, his deep baritone laced with indignation. Judith knows full well that your father was of sound mind when he drafted his will. We even have video of him explaining his decisions. She's contested the will 3 times and lost every appeal. They all side with us. I whispered, Bernard, everyone in that room thinks I'm some manipulative thief. There was a pause, then Bernard asked, do you have your laptop with you? It's in my trunk, I replied, puzzled by the sudden shift. Good. Meet me at my office in 30 minutes. If Judith wants to make this public, then let's give the public the full story. Every document, every court filing, every piece of evidence your father left to protect you from exactly this scenario. For the first time since fleeing the ballroom, I felt something more than humiliation. A spark of determination ignited inside me. I'll be there in 20, I said as I started the engine. Bernard's office was still lit when I pulled into the parking lot of a downtown glass and steel building. He buzzed me in immediately, and I found him surrounded by stacks of binders and files. I've been organizing these since your father passed, he explained, gesturing to the neatly labeled documents. Thomas knew Judith might try something like this. He was always strategic, always thinking several moves ahead. As Bernard sifted through files, I paced the room, anger gradually replacing my earlier shame. I don't understand why she'd do this in public. She's already contested the will and lost. What does she hope to gain? I asked. Bernard looked up with serious gray eyes. Judith has always been obsessed with appearances and social standing. If she can't get the company legally, she'll try to make your position untenable by turning the business community against you. And she's succeeding, I muttered, remembering the hostile stares. Not for long, Bernard replied as he sorted the documents into new piles. Your father recorded everything. The times Pamela said she wasn't interested in the business, the management courses he urged you to take while you were on tour, and the weekend strategy sessions you both held at home. Then he handed me a USB drive. This contains video testimony from your father explaining his decision. He recorded it 3 months before he passed, specifically to prevent Judith from challenging his competence. I clutched the drive, remembering that day. Dad was so weak, yet his mind remained razor sharp. Though I'd known about this recording, I hadn't had the heart to watch it since his death. There's more, Bernard continued. He revealed financial records showing how I had grown the company by 22% since taking over, employee testimonials praising how I averted layoffs when the Anderson contract fell through, and board meeting minutes where I proposed giving Pamela a director position, which he turned down because it involved too much tedious paperwork. A plan began forming in my mind. Bernard, is that color printer of yours still lightning fast? I asked. He smiled knowingly. Indeed it is, and I've got plenty of binders for the next hour. We worked side by side, organizing irrefutable documentation that told the true story of Carter Manufacturing's succession. Bernard printed copies of court decisions, financial statements, and employee letters, while I arranged them into presentation binders, one for each table at the gala. During our work, Bernard made calls to 3 of his associates who agreed to meet us at the hotel. These respected attorneys would lend additional credibility to our presentation. This isn't just about clearing your name tonight, Bernard said as we wrapped up. It's about securing your position permanently. After this, Judith won't be able to undermine you again. I glanced at my watch. It was just past 10 p.m., and the gala was still in full swing. You know, I remarked as I loaded the binders into Bernard's SUV. My father always told me that in business, you don't just defend yourself when attacked. You counter with such overwhelming evidence that your opponent regrets ever questioning you. Bernard smiled. He'd be proud of you tonight. I took a deep breath as we drove back to the Westbrook Hotel in silence. My nervous energy filled the car while Bernard navigated through downtown Houston's Saturday night traffic. The binders in the back seat felt like they held my entire life. My father's wishes, my hard work, my legitimacy. Remember, Bernard said as we pulled up to the valet stand, you're not just Thomas Carter's daughter tonight, you're the CEO of Carter Manufacturing. We unloaded the SUV, and Bernard's 3 colleagues met us at the entrance. The 4 attorneys, dressed in impeccable suits, created a powerful, almost fortress-like presence around me. Even the doorman who'd seen me run out in tears now stepped aside with wide eyes. My heart pounded as we approached the ballroom doors. Inside, the gala continued as if nothing had happened. Crystal glasses clinked, expensive perfume filled the air, and a string quartet played a familiar waltz. But the moment I stepped through the doorway, a hush fell over the nearest tables. The silence spread like a wave, and heads turned as conversations died down. Judith was standing near the cake display, champagne flute in hand, looking triumphant. But when she saw me, her smile vanished. Pamela, standing beside her, grabbed her mother's arm and whispered urgently. Then in a commanding tone that carried across the room, Bernard announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse the interruption. My name is Bernard Wesley, longtime counsel to Thomas Carter and executor of his estate. I believe there's been a misunderstanding about Carter Manufacturing that needs to be cleared up." The quartet stopped playing, and every eye in the room fixed on us. Earlier that evening, serious accusations had been made against me, Venus Carter, the rightful CEO of Carter Manufacturing. Bernard continued, "As officers of the court, my colleagues and I are here to present the legal and factual record." My legs trembled as we advanced. The attorneys began distributing binders to each table, and I walked directly to a small stage where the string quartet had been seated. One of the musicians handed me a microphone. 2 hours ago, I was accused of stealing my father's company. I began, my voice steadier than I expected. I was called a thief and a manipulator. I was booed and humiliated right in front of you all. I paused and scanned the room. Some guests looked down, unable to meet my gaze, while others appeared confused as they opened the binders with furrowed brows. My stepmother, Judith Carter, orchestrated that scene. What she didn't tell you is that she has contested my father's will 3 times in court. I nodded to Bernard, who then projected the court documents onto the large screen behind me. She lost every time because my father's wishes were clear and legally binding, I said. Judith began moving toward me, but 2 of Bernard's colleagues stepped into her path. "Before you hear from me," I continued, I'd like you to listen to my father. Bernard connected the USB drive to the sound system. The screen flickered and then my father appeared, gaunt but with clear eyes, sitting in his study at home. The room fell into complete silence as his image filled the screen. Despite his illness, he sat upright in his leather chair. His once robust frame was now thin, yet his eyes remained sharp and full of intelligence. Several people gasped. Some hadn't realized just how ravaged he had become in his final months. My name is Thomas Carter, he began, his voice raspy but firm. I am recording this statement on March 15th of last year in the presence of my attorney, Bernard Wesley, and Dr. Catherine Wilson, who has certified my mental competence. The camera briefly panned to show both professionals before returning to my father. I am the founder and CEO of Carter Manufacturing. After much thought and careful planning, I have decided to leave controlling interest in my company to my daughter Venus Carter. Dad shifted slightly, wincing with discomfort before continuing. I want to explain why I made this decision, as I know it may cause conflict after I'm gone. His gaze seemed to lock onto Judith, even though he couldn't have known she would be watching this recording at her birthday gala a year later. Venus has shown both the acumen and the passion needed to lead Carter Manufacturing. Despite her career as a pianist, she has devoted countless hours to learning the business, analyzing our operations, and understanding our industry. She even completed business courses at my suggestion, and has demonstrated remarkable skill in strategic planning. The video then cut to clips of me at the factory with Dad, reviewing blueprints, meeting with clients, moments I hadn't even realized were being recorded. My stepdaughter Pamela was offered several chances to take part in the company over the years, but she always declined. When asked directly, she stated, and I quote, "I have no interest in spending my life making boring industrial parts." The video then showed Pamela at a family dinner, rolling her eyes and repeating those exact words, followed by her turning down a management training opportunity during a recorded meeting in Dad's office. I love both of my daughters, Dad continued, but a business must be led by someone who is truly passionate about it. Venus has that passion. I am of sound mind and body in making this decision. Dr. Wilson then appeared on screen, confirming that my father was indeed of sound mental competence when he made his final decision, with her credentials displayed neatly below her name. The video ended as my father looked straight into the camera. I trust Venus to safeguard my legacy and the livelihoods of everyone at Carter Manufacturing, he declared. As the screen faded to black, I scanned the room. Many guests were now poring over the binders, their faces etched with shock and dismay, emotions that had completely replaced their earlier judgments. Since I took the reins, I began speaking into the microphone. Carter Manufacturing's revenue has jumped 22%. We've entered 2 new markets, created 17 jobs, and avoided any layoffs, even after losing the Anderson contract. I nodded toward Bernard, who then projected our financial charts onto the screen. On page 12 of your binders, you'll find letters from longtime employees, many of whom worked with my father for decades, voicing their support for my leadership. I drew a deep breath before continuing. Page 15 shows the formal job offer we extended to Pamela 3 months ago. A director role with significant authority but fewer day-to-day responsibilities. She turned it down via email, claiming she had better things to do than waste time in a factory. I caught a glimpse of Pamela's expression as several guests shifted their attention toward her. My final section, I said, my voice growing firmer, includes the court decisions that rejected Judith's challenges to my father's will. 3 different judges found no evidence of manipulation or undue influence, and the medical reports confirmed that Dad was fully competent when he made his decision. I stepped forward, set the microphone aside for a moment, and fixed my gaze on Judith, who stood frozen near the cake display. You demanded I return what isn't mine, I said loudly for everyone to hear. But these documents prove without a shadow of a doubt that Carter Manufacturing is exactly where my father intended it, to be in my hands. Grabbing the microphone again, I addressed the entire room. I understand many of you were misled tonight. You heard only one side of a complicated story and reacted based on incomplete information. I don't blame you. I only ask that you review the evidence before making further judgments. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. The hostility had melted away, replaced by discomfort and embarrassment. Gregory Thompson, CEO of our largest client, stood up from his table. Venus, I owe you an apology, he said, his voice resonating across the room. I should have known better than to accept such serious accusations without question. His public admission seemed to break a dam, and soon other guests were flipping through the binders more intently. A few began to murmur, someone at a back table started clapping slowly, and eventually others joined in. Then Judith broke through the attorney's blockade, storming toward me with Pamela trailing behind. How dare you, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. This is my birthday celebration, and you've turned it into a corporate presentation. This is exactly why Thomas should never have left you the company. You have no class, no sense of propriety. I smiled calmly, aware that every eye in the room was fixed on us. Interesting perspective, Judith, I replied. You used your own birthday party to publicly accuse me of theft and get me thrown out. You even manipulated him when he was dying. Pamela's voice trembled as she interjected. You were barely even around. Bernard stepped forward, tablet in hand. Actually, the visitor logs from the hospital and hospice show that Venus visited your father 83 times during his final 6 months. In contrast, the records show Pamela visited 12 times, and Mrs. Carter visited 37 times. Pamela's mouth opened, but no words came out. Judith then declared, the company was meant to secure our future. Dropping all pretense, she added, Thomas promised me we would always be taken care of, and you are. I replied firmly, Dad's will provided generously for both of you. The trust he established guarantees you'll never face financial hardship. But he didn't give you control of his life's work, because he knew what would happen if he did. I lowered my voice so only they could hear. For a moment Judith's face contorted with rage. I even thought she might strike me. Instead, she grabbed Pamela's arm and began dragging her toward the exit. This isn't over, she spat over her shoulder. Actually it is, Bernard called after her. Any further legal challenges will be deemed vexatious litigation, and we will seek sanctions. As they disappeared through the doors, the room's tension visibly deflated. Guests started approaching me, offering apologies and congratulations on the company's success. Some admitted they'd always found Judith's version suspicious, but hadn't felt comfortable speaking up. Edward Winters, the former CFO who had worked with my father for 20 years before retiring, came over and squeezed my hand. Thomas was right about you, he said. You've got his backbone. He always said you had your mother's talent, but his head for business was unmatched. Tears pricked my eyes, but these were not tears of humiliation. Thank you, Edward. That means everything to me, I replied. As the evening progressed, I found myself surrounded by support rather than scorn. Bernard stood nearby, his satisfaction evident in his smile. As the attorneys began collecting the binders, they had served their purpose. What now? Bernard asked as the party gradually returned to normal. I looked around at the room filled with Houston's business elite, people crucial to Carter Manufacturing's future. Straightening my shoulders, I declared, I network. After all, I'm not just Thomas Carter's daughter tonight. I'm the CEO of Carter Manufacturing. It's been 6 months since Judith's disastrous birthday gala. A night that not only changed how the business community viewed me, but also how I saw myself. Walking back into that ballroom armed with undeniable evidence, and the truth transformed me in ways I'm still discovering. Carter Manufacturing has since flourished beyond my wildest expectations. After the gala, several guests approached me with new business opportunities. Gregory Thompson's company doubled its order, and 3 former clients, who had been uncertain, returned with long-term contracts. Our workforce has grown by 32 employees, and we've even expanded to a second facility in Austin. The aftermath for Judith and Pamela wasn't what anyone expected. 2 weeks after the gala, Pamela appeared unannounced at my office. Sitting across from me, nervously twisting her hand, she said bluntly, I need a job. Mom has exhausted most of her personal savings on these legal battles, and my trust from Dad won't fully mature for another 3 years. I studied my stepsister's face, searching for any hint of deceit, but I found only desperation. Why come to me after everything that's happened? She admitted reluctantly, you're the only one who's truly succeeding. Everyone else in Mom's social circle is just pretending. Despite Bernard's advice, I offered Pamela an entry-level position in our marketing department. To my surprise, she accepted, and even more surprisingly, she's shown real aptitude for the work. We're not friends and maybe we never will be, but there's a growing professional respect between us. Judith, on the other hand, left Houston. Shortly after the gala, she moved to Phoenix, reportedly pursuing a new, wealthy widower. Our paths haven't crossed since, and I doubt they ever will again. My personal life, too, has undergone significant transformation. For years, music defined me. The piano was my constant companion through the loneliness after Mom died, the awkward blending of families when Dad married Judith, and the grueling schedule of conservatory and touring. When Dad fell ill and I stepped away from performing, I thought it was only temporary. But running Carter Manufacturing has awakened something unexpected in me. The thrill of leadership, the satisfaction of creating jobs, and the challenge of solving problems. These things fulfill me in ways I never imagined. I still play piano, usually late at night when the work is done, but my relationship with music has evolved into something more personal and less about performance. Last month, I did something Dad would have loved. I established the Thomas Carter Foundation, dedicated to bringing music education to underprivileged schools across Texas. The foundation also provides business mentorship to young entrepreneurs, blending both sides of my life into something truly meaningful. At our launch event, my first public appearance since taking over, I performed Dad's favorite Chopin nocturne on a grand piano that we placed in the factory. As I played among the machines he built, surrounded by the employees whose livelihoods he secured and I now protect, I felt his presence more strongly than I had since his passing. I came to realize that inheritance isn't just about assets and ownership. It's about carrying forward the best parts of those we've lost, while adding our own unique contributions. The business community that once booed me now praises Carter Manufacturing as a model of innovation and ethical leadership. The company thrives, Pamela is finding her way. And I've discovered a new harmony between the artist I once was and the businesswoman I have become. Dad was right all along. Some legacies aren't stolen, they're earned.